Normally, when students submit their requirements, particularly with regard to assignments, wherein I request them to analyze data and prepare a report for a statistical analysis, normally what they do is they just submit the output from the software that they're using, either JASP, Jamovi, or SPSS, together with the text report. However, for today, I want us to talk about how do you prepare an APA formatted table now, following the parameters of the APA Manual for Publications 7th edition. So that's what I'm gonna talk about today, and I'll be using the example from the output of the analysis that we've done earlier on the relationship between biological sex and venting. So if you remember that data set or that statistical output, it looks something like this. If you copy those tables and paste it in a Word document, it would look something like this. And normally this is what I see students submitting to me. However, this really doesn't look that good. And if you check on um, published materials, you really won't see tables as cluttered as this. So what I want us to do is for us to have something like this and convert it into something like this. So the first thing that you've noticed is that I have merged the two tables. So we have one table for the result of the t-test. We have another table for the descriptive statistics. And in this simple table, I've actually merged those two tables. I have left off some information, for example, standard error, uh, this column. So let's take a look first now. So on this side of the table, you'll notice that I placed my descriptives. So I've indicated my groupings. We're dealing with sex differences. So there are two groups, the group of female and the group of males. And then for the next column, we have their means. So this is the mean for females. I got this from here. And this is the average venting of males. I got this from here. And of course, the standard deviation, which I got from this column. And then I simply copied, for the other half of the table, I simply copied the results of the uh, independent samples t-test. So particularly the t value, the degrees of freedom, the p value, and the effect size, which is Cohen's d. All right, so this is how your table, if you're doing t-test, either t-test for independent samples or t-test for paired samples, it doesn't really matter. The table should look something like this. But what are the guidelines when you're preparing for a table for your manuscript, so that you can also be guided on how to prepare other tables now, not only for t-test results, but also for results for ANOVA, um, multiple regression. So how do you actually prepare that? And maybe in future episodes, I'll be able to specifically talk about preparing for tables for other analysis. But for today, let's focus on t-test result. Okay, so here are some guidelines. So number one, the table number, for example, table number 1 appears above the table title in bold font. So we can see it here. And it's above the table title, which is right here. And it is in a bold font. The number, the number of the tables in the number tables in the order in which they are mentioned in your paper. So if you will mention this first in your paper, these results, then that becomes your table number 1. Now, but of course, if this results will be mentioned among the results, no, third on your paper, then this would be table number 3, which means to say that there's of course table number 1 and table number 2. Okay? The table title appears on double spaced lines below the table number. So you can see that we have it's double spaced, from the table number to the table title. And then the table title should be descriptive. And you can see it here, sex difference in venting. So I suppose that is pretty much descriptive of what's going on in the results wherein we are literally mentioning or showing the differences in venting between males and females. The title should be capitalized, meaning to say, when I say capitalized, I don't mean to say capitalized all of the letters, just capitalize the first letter of the major words. So sex, difference, and venting are the major words in the title, so those are capitalized, and they should be in italic title cases. So it is in italics, as you can see. Okay. Next, in terms of column headings, so these are the column headings. All tables should include column headings, including a stub heading. So this is your stub heading. The stub heading is basically the heading in the leftmost column. So this is our leftmost column. So there should be a heading here, because normally some individuals or some students do not put a heading here, so there should be a heading even for the leftmost column. And as you can see, all of the columns do have headings. All right. The heading may be words or statistical notations. So it can be words, like groups. But for the most part, if the columns are intended to be populated with statistical values, then it should be statistical notation. So instead of mean, which is what the JASP table gives us, just use the statistical notation of M, SD for standard deviation, of course our T statistic, DF for degrees of freedom, and P for our probability value, and then Cohen's D. Non-Greek letter statistical notations must be in italics. So, and this is true both for the table and your write-up. So these are our statistical notations. None of them are Greek letters. These are, I don't know what kind of letters these are, but they're not Greek. So you can see that all of them are italicized. Now, even the D in Cohen's D. Okay. Greek letters, on the other hand, or Greek letter notations, must not be in italics. What are some examples of these Greek notations? Later on, perhaps in regression, you will encounter Greek letter notations, for example, beta, or for example, Cronbach, alpha. So those are Greek statistical notations. We do not have them in italics. So just regular font. And then the center the headings should be centered. They should not be in boldface. They shouldn't be in italics. So just regular. Sorry. I should be removing that. Not in boldface. Sometimes it can be in italics, especially in when we're dealing with statistical notations that are non-Greek letters. So they are centered. Let's check if they are centered. So see, they are centered. All right. For the table body, the table is open, meaning to say there are no vertical lines. So as you can see here, all I have are just horizontal lines. No, there are no vertical lines. I don't even have a horizontal line, between female and male. So all you need, the horizontal lines that you need are basically to identify which is your heading and where your table ends. And perhaps if your table is very complex and there are subsections in the tables, then perhaps you can use a horizontal line to indicate where the division is, but there are no vertical lines. The table body may be single spaced, 1.5 spaced, or double spaced, depending on your preference. So in this case, I'm just using a single spaced table. Okay. Numerals should be expressed in a consistent number of decimal places. So typically, it's only limited to 2 or 3 decimal places, but whichever you choose, you must be consistent. The choice of 2 or 3 depend on the level of precision that is necessary for the measurement. In the current example, I used 3 decimal places, and you will notice that I am consistent throughout the table. So 3 decimal places for the mean, for the standard deviation, the t-value, the p-value, and the Cohen's d. Left align information in the leftmost column or the stub column of the body, but center the heading. So this is your stub column. The content of the columns must be left aligned. They're not centered, as you can see, but the heading has to be centered. Okay, so ito lang. These are the ones that should be left aligned. And for the rest, center information in all other cells in the table. And if we check here, are they centered? So you can see that they are centered. Right. However, left align the information if doing so would improve readability, particularly when cells contain a lot of text. But I think this is fairly readable, so there's really no need to left align some of them. So centering them is sufficient, and that is basically the default for formatting the table. Now, the lead zero. Please take note if a statistical value can be greater than 1, use a leading zero. Okay. Of course, if the value is more than 1, then obviously you'll have either, you'll have an integer here before, you have a whole number rather, before the decimal value. An example of which is this one. So if you'll notice, I used a lead zero. Why? Because it's quite possible to have a Cohen's d that is greater than 1. You have a Cohen's d of 1.2, and so I have a lead zero here. However, if a statistic cannot be greater than 1, and we have a couple of those, for example, p-values, because the largest possible probability is 1, or for example, correlation coefficients, the highest possible correlation coefficient is either -1 or +1. Some standardized values, when you're dealing with those type of statistic, do not include or do not use a lead zero. An example of that would be the p-value. The p-value does not exceed 1, and you will notice here that there is no lead zero. So the expression is just 0.007, not 0.007. So again, no lead zero for values that cannot exceed 1. Okay, so that sums up basic guidelines in preparing a nice APA formatted table, and you can use all of those other guidelines that I've mentioned a while ago in preparing tables for other statistical results. All right, so that's it. I hope that you learned something, and I will see you in the next.